The morning of June 9th, 1944, Neuilly-en-Bessin, France, 3 days after the Allied landings on D-Day. Lieutenant George Kenneth Henry peers through the cramped turret of his Sherman tank, watching the Norman countryside through a narrow vision slit. His tank is different from the others around him. Protruding from its turret is a barrel so long it threatens to catch on hedgerows and street signs. His gunner, Trooper Albert Chapman, sits hunched beside the massive breech of a 17-pounder anti-tank gun, a weapon so large it required the removal of the co-driver's position just to fit inside the Sherman's turret. Around them, 8 other Sherman tanks from the Canadian Armoured Regiment wait in hull-down positions, their commanders scanning the fields ahead. Then, through the morning haze, they appear 12 Panzerkampfwagen Mark V Panther tanks, pride of the German Panzerwaffe, racing toward the village at full speed. Each Panther weighs 45 tons of sloped armour and lethal firepower. Their long 75mm guns can penetrate any Allied tank at over a mile. Their frontal armour, 80mm thick and angled at 55 degrees, has proven nearly impervious to standard Allied anti-tank weapons. The SS crews manning these machines belong to the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, among the most fanatical and capable tank units in the German arsenal. The Panthers manoeuvre to present their frontal armour to the Canadian positions in Neuilly, a tactical decision that would prove catastrophic. In doing so, they expose their flanks to Henry's waiting Firefly. Chapman tracks the lead Panther through his telescopic sight. 900 yards, 850 yards. He waits. The Panthers line up, one behind the other, like targets in a shooting gallery. Lined up like ducks in a row, Chapman would later recall. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the pocket comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The 17-pounder barks. The lead Panther shudders as the armour-piercing shell punches through its side armour. Before the German crews can react, Chapman fires again and again. 5 rounds, 5 Panthers burning. The entire engagement lasts less than 4 minutes. The remaining Panthers retreat in disarray, leaving 7 of their number destroyed or disabled on the Norman fields. Not a single Canadian tank is lost. This moment crystallizes a profound shift in the armour warfare of 1944. For the German panzer crews, who had dominated battlefields from Poland to the steppes of Russia, who had learned to expect numerical superiority from their opponents but technical inferiority from their equipment, a new reality was emerging. That ungainly Sherman chassis, derided by Wehrmacht tankers as a Ronson that lights every time, had acquired teeth. And those teeth could bite through even a panther's hide. To understand why this matters, one must first understand what the Panther represented to both sides in the summer of 1944. The Panzerkampfwagen 5 Panther was born from desperation and genius in equal measure. In June 1941, German panzer divisions smashed into the Soviet Union, expecting to encounter the same poorly equipped, poorly led forces they had crushed in Poland and France. Instead, they met the 34. This Soviet medium tank, with its sloped armour, wide tracks, and powerful 76mm gun, could penetrate the frontal armour of German Panzer IIIs and IVs with ease while bouncing their return fire off its glacis plate. German tank commanders, accustomed to technical superiority, suddenly found themselves outmatched. The German response came swiftly. In November 1941, the Waffenamt issued specifications for a new medium tank, incorporating lessons learned from the 34. 2 companies, Daimler-Benz and MAN, submitted designs. Daimler-Benz's proposal looked remarkably similar to the Soviet tank, even featuring a rear-mounted turret and diesel engine. MAN's design placed the turret centrally and used a more conventional gasoline engine. After extensive debate, the MAN design was approved in May 1942. The resulting Panther combined intimidating specifications with German engineering ambition. Its frontal glacis plate measured 80mm thick, set at 55 degrees from vertical. This angle meant that an incoming projectile had to penetrate not 80mm, but approximately 140 mm of effective armor. The turret mantlet added another 100 mm of cast armor. The sides were 40 mm thick, angled at 40 degrees. Only the top and belly armor remained thin at 16 mm, a calculated risk to save weight. The Panther's main gun, the 75 mm KK-42L70, featured a barrel 70 calibers long, giving it exceptional muzzle velocity and armor penetration. At 1,000 meters, it could penetrate 140 mm of armor set at 30 degrees. At 500 meters, this increased to 174 mm. No Allied tank in service in early 1944 could match this combination of protection and firepower. Production began in January 1943. The first Panthers went into action at Kursk that July, where they immediately demonstrated both their potential and their problems. The Panther could destroy Soviet 34s at ranges where the Soviet tanks couldn't effectively return fire. However, mechanical reliability proved abysmal. Engines caught fire. Final drives failed catastrophically. Many Panthers broke down before reaching the battlefield. Those that survived combat often couldn't be recovered due to inadequate repair facilities and spare parts shortages. Nevertheless, German industry persevered. By June 1944, approximately 2,000 Panthers had rolled off production lines. These tanks equipped panzer divisions across all fronts. For crews fortunate enough to receive a mechanically sound example, the Panther represented the finest medium tank in the world. German tankers learned to trust their armor. Training emphasized using the Panther's superior range and frontal protection. Doctrine called for engaging enemy armor at distances exceeding 1,000 meters, where the Panther's gun remained effective while most Allied weapons could not penetrate its glacis. Panthers were to advance with their frontal armor toward the enemy, retreat in reverse when possible, and never expose their thinner side armor. This confidence extended to their assessment of Allied armor. By mid-1944, German crews had substantial experience fighting American M4 Shermans. The standard Sherman mounted a 75 mm M3 gun, adequate for infantry support, but marginal against armor. At 1,000 meters, the 75 mm M61 APCBC round could penetrate 73 mm of vertical armor. Against the Panther's angled glacis, it was essentially useless except at suicidal ranges under 200 meters. Even against the Panther's side armor, the 75 mm struggled. Intelligence reports and combat experience taught German tankers that Shermans typically operated in numerical superiority, sometimes 5-to-1 or greater. This was expected. What mattered was that in any individual encounter, the Panther held overwhelming advantage. German commanders developed tactics exploiting this disparity. Engage at long range. Use terrain for hull-down positions. Let the Sherman close, thinking its numbers provide security. Then destroy them systematically before they reach effective range. These were not empty boasts. In battles across Normandy, individual Panthers regularly engaged and destroyed multiple Shermans. The kill ratio initially favored German armor by comfortable margins. Panther crews developed a certain contempt for the Sherman, viewing it as a mass-produced product of American industrial capacity rather than serious military engineering. Then came the Firefly, and everything changed. The 17-pounder anti-tank gun had been under development by British designers since 1941, before America even entered the war. British military planners, facing the Tiger I and anticipating more heavily armoured German tanks, recognized that their existing 6-pounder anti-tank gun, though excellent against medium armour, would prove inadequate against future threats. The 17-pounder represented a dramatic leap in capability. Its 3-inch bore diameter and massive powder charge generated muzzle velocities exceeding 2,800 feet per second with armor-piercing ammunition. The standard armor-piercing capped ballistic capped round, or APCBC, could theoretically penetrate 163 mm of armor at 500 meters, and 150 mm at 1,000 meters against vertical plate. Later in the war, armor-piercing discarding sabot ammunition, or APDS, pushed these figures even higher, reaching 256 mm at 500 meters, though at the cost of accuracy. These penetration figures meant the 17-pounder could defeat the frontal armor of a Tiger I at ranges exceeding 1 mile. More importantly for the Normandy campaign, it could penetrate a Panther's turret mantlet at over 2,000 yards and its side armor at virtually any combat range. However, the 17-pounder presented a significant problem. It was enormous. The gun measured approximately 21 feet long. Its breech mechanism required substantial space. Ammunition for the weapon was correspondingly large, with each round measuring over 3 feet in length. The weapon had been designed as a towed anti-tank gun and for mounting in purpose-built tank destroyer chassis. Fitting it into existing tank turrets proved extraordinarily difficult. British tank development in the early war years had pursued indigenous designs. The Cromwell cruiser tank, fast and reasonably well armoured, mounted only a 75mm gun due to turret size constraints. The Challenger tank destroyer, specifically designed to mount the 17-pounder, suffered delays and mechanical problems. By late 1943, with Operation Overlord approaching, British planners faced an uncomfortable reality. They possessed an excellent anti-tank gun, but no reliable vehicle to carry it into battle in sufficient numbers. The solution emerged from the persistence of 2 British officers, Major George Brighty and Lieutenant Colonel Witheridge. Both men had combat experience in North Africa. Both understood that Allied forces would face heavily armoured German tanks in the coming invasion. And both recognized that Britain already possessed thousands of American-built Sherman tanks under Lend-Lease. The Ministry of Supply initially rejected the idea. The Sherman's turret, designed for the 75mm gun, seemed too small for the 17-pounder. Engineering difficulties appeared insurmountable. Resources were better spent on British tank designs. Brighty and Witheridge refused to accept this assessment. Working with engineers at the Woolwich Arsenal and with considerable improvisation, they began trial conversions. The challenge was immense. The 17-pounder's recoil cylinders had to be shortened and repositioned. The gun mantlet required complete redesign. The radio equipment had to be moved outside the turret into a bustle on the rear plate. Most dramatically, the assistant driver's position in the hull had to be eliminated entirely, converting that space into ammunition storage for the massive 17-pounder rounds. By November 1943, a working prototype demonstrated feasibility. The weapon could be made to fit. Accuracy remained acceptable. The Sherman's suspension, though stressed by the additional weight, could manage. With D-Day looming and no alternative available, the War Office reversed its position. Production orders went out in February 1944. Factories began converting Sherman hulls at an urgent pace. The designation became Sherman IC or Sherman VC, depending on hull type, with the C indicating the 17-pounder gun. The unofficial name Firefly, referencing the brilliant muzzle flash produced by the high-velocity gun, quickly gained popularity among crews. By early June 1944, approximately 300 Fireflies had been distributed to British and Canadian armoured units preparing for Normandy. Doctrine called for 1 Firefly per tank troop, with the remaining 3 tanks mounting standard 75mm guns. This ratio reflects both production limitations and practical considerations. The Firefly's high-explosive shell for the 17-pounder remained inferior to the 75mm HE for infantry support work. Mixed troops provided both anti-armor capability and general-purpose firepower. The crews assigned to Fireflies faced unique challenges. The cramped turret made loading difficult. Trooper Chapman later described the process as requiring the loader to manhandle these enormous rounds in a space barely large enough to turn around. The powerful recoil could cause injury if crew members were improperly positioned. The brilliant muzzle flash temporarily blinded gunners and commanders unless they closed their eyes at the moment of firing. The massive blast kicked up enormous clouds of dust and smoke, obscuring observation and revealing the Firefly's position. Perhaps most significantly, the Firefly's distinctive long barrel made it immediately recognizable compared to standard Shermans. Crews quickly realized this would make them priority targets. Various camouflage schemes were attempted. Some units painted the forward half of the barrel white on the underside to create shadow patterns that made it appear shorter. Others wrapped the muzzle in camouflage netting. Some simply accepted the risk, trusting in the gun's range advantage to engage German armor before being engaged themselves. These preparations occurred against incomplete intelligence. Allied planners had dramatically underestimated German Panther deployment. The Panther had been expected to appear in limited numbers as a heavy tank alongside the Tiger, rather than as the standard German medium tank. Statistical analysis only began revealing the true scale of Panther production in early 1944, too late to significantly modify Allied armor procurement. Formation commanders and tank crews would discover the extent of German armored strength only upon landing in France. The dawn light of June 9th revealed a tactical situation that seemed to favor the German attackers. SS Brigade Führer Kurt Meyer, commanding the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, had ordered his 3rd Panzer Company forward to seize Nori-en-Bessin as part of a broader effort to contain the Allied bridgehead. Meyer, a veteran of campaigns in Poland, France, Greece and Russia, understood armor warfare. His division represented some of the finest equipment and most motivated personnel available to the Wehrmacht in 1944. The 12 Panthers assigned to this attack belonged to SS Panzer Regiment 12. Their crews had trained extensively on the new tanks, though combat experience varied. Some commanders had fought on the Eastern Front. Others were relative newcomers, products of Germany's accelerated training programs as casualties mounted. All understood their mission: drive the Canadians from Norrie, secure the village, and establish a defensive line that would anchor further operations. The Panthers advanced rapidly, engines roaring, tracks churning the Norman soil. Their speed surprised Canadian defenders. Standard German doctrine called for methodical advances with infantry support, but Meyer's orders emphasized speed and shock. The Panthers quickly outpaced their accompanying infantry, who were forced to ground by Canadian artillery fire. This left the armor unsupported, vulnerable, but seemingly unstoppable. As the Panthers approached Norrie, their commanders made a tactically sound decision. The village held Canadian anti-tank guns, including 6-pounders that could potentially penetrate Panther side armor. The Panther platoon leaders ordered their tanks to swing left, presenting their heavily armoured fronts to the village while advancing. This manoeuvre would protect them from the 6-pounders and allow them to engage the Canadian positions with their superior 75mm guns. What the German crews did not know, what their reconnaissance had failed to discover, was that 9 Canadian Sherman tanks sat in hull-down positions off their left flank. These tanks belonged to the 6th Canadian Armoured Regiment, known as the 1st Hussars. They had moved forward that morning to reinforce the Regina Rifles defending Norrie. Among these 9 Shermans was Lieutenant Henry's Firefly. From his position, Henry watched the Panthers execute their manoeuvre. The German tanks presented their flanks at ranges between 850 and 1,000 metres. Ideal engagement distance for the 17-pounder. Henry issued calm orders. His gunner, Trooper Chapman, tracked the lead Panther. The loader, Trooper Seaman, positioned the massive 3-foot-long armour-piercing round. Time seemed to compress. The 17-pounder fired. The sound was distinctive, different from the sharp crack of a 75mm, deeper, more violent. The muzzle flash erupted from the long barrel, brilliant even in daylight. The APCBC round crossed 900 yards in less than a second and struck the lead Panther's side armour. 40mm thick, angled at 40 degrees, the armour provided approximately 55mm of effective protection. Against the 17-pounder's penetration capability of 163mm at 500 metres, it might as well have been paper. The round punched through the Panther's side, penetrating into the crew compartment. Inside Panther number 335, commanded by Untersturmführer Stage, the impact was catastrophic. The penetrator and fragments of armor tore through the interior, striking ammunition stored in the sponson. Secondary explosions followed. Crew members who survived the initial hit had seconds to evacuate before flames engulfed the fighting compartment. Chapman was already loading the next round. His hands moved with practiced efficiency despite the cramped turret. The breach closed. He traversed to the second Panther. Fired. Another hit. The German crews, still processing what was happening, attempted to traverse their turrets toward this new threat. Panther turrets, like most German tanks, featured manual traverse. Even experienced crews required approximately 15 to 20 seconds for a 90-degree traverse. Chapman fired faster than they could respond. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The third round caught Panther number 325, commanded by Untersturmführer Alban. Adolf Morawetz, another Panther commander in the formation, watched in horror as neighboring tanks exploded one after another. He initially thought his own tank had struck a mine when the impact came. After a dull bang and shaking, as if the tracks had been ripped off, the tank came to a standstill. He later recalled. Before he could react, a second impact set the ammunition for the coaxial machine gun alight. The Panther burst into flames. Through his periscope, as he struggled to open his hatch, Morawetz witnessed the neighboring Panther explode so violently that it threw the turret into the air. Chapman fired his fourth round. Fifth, sixth, 5 rounds found their marks. 5 Panthers burned or exploded. The 6th round missed as the surviving Panthers, realizing they were trapped in a killing zone, began emergency maneuvers. Some attempted to retreat. Others tried to present their frontal armor to the Canadian tanks. All coordination had dissolved into individual survival. The 8 standard Shermans joined the engagement, firing their 75mm guns. At these ranges, they could penetrate Panther side armor, particularly if they could hit the ammunition sponsons or engine compartment. 2 more Panthers fell to this fire. In approximately 4 minutes, 7 of 12 Panthers were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5 withdrew in disorder, abandoning their infantry and their objective. The cost to the Canadians: 0 tanks lost, 0 casualties in the tank crews. Word of this engagement spread rapidly through both Allied and German command structures. For Canadian and British commanders, it validated the Firefly concept. Here was proof that, properly employed, the 17-pounder could negate the Panther's advantages. For German commanders, it represented something more troubling: evidence that Allied armor had evolved beyond their intelligence estimates. German after-action reports from the 12th SS emphasized the surprise and effectiveness of the long-barreled Sherman. SS Standartenführer Max Wünsche, commanding SS Panzer Regiment 12, noted in his report that the attacking Panthers had been engaged by tanks with exceptional range and penetration. Tank crews who survived reported that these Shermans could penetrate Panther armor at ranges where return fire from the 75mm Panther gun was unlikely to defeat Sherman frontal armor reliably. This created a psychological problem. The Panther's primary tactical advantage had been its ability to engage Allied armor beyond effective return fire range. If certain Shermans now possessed equal or superior range capability, this advantage evaporated. German crews would need to identify and prioritize these long-barreled Shermans, while simultaneously engaging standard Shermans and supporting infantry. The cognitive load in combat increased dramatically. Within days of Nory-en-Bessin, German tank crews across Normandy began receiving instructions to engage Fireflies first, before other targets. These instructions came through both official channels and informal combat experience sharing. Veterans who encountered Fireflies and survived warned newer crews about the distinctive long barrel. Unit commanders emphasized the threat in briefings. However, identifying fireflies in combat proved challenging. The fundamental similarity between fireflies and standard Shermans meant that at combat ranges, particularly in the bocage terrain of Normandy with its hedgerows and limited sight lines, distinguishing the 17-pounder from the 75mm gun required precious seconds that commanders often lacked. By the time positive identification occurred, the Firefly might already have fired. This uncertainty affected German tactics. Some Panther commanders began treating all Shermans as potential Fireflies, engaging at maximum range regardless of target identification. This consumed ammunition more quickly and reduced effectiveness against actual priority targets. Other commanders attempted to identify Fireflies before engaging, accepting the risk of being fired upon first in exchange for efficient ammunition use. Neither approach proved satisfactory. The technical reality of the Firefly's penetration capability deserves examination. British testing confirmed that the 17-pounder firing APCBC ammunition could penetrate the Panther's 100mm gun mantlet from over 2,500 yards at 30 degrees angle or from 1,000 yards at 37 degrees. The 120mm thicker mantlet introduced on later Panther variants could be penetrated from over 2,500 yards if struck at normal angle or from 1,000 yards at 30 degrees. Against Panther side armour, the figures were even more favourable. The 17-pounder could penetrate 40mm side armour at angles up to 60 to 62 degrees from 1,000 yards. In practical terms, this meant that if a Firefly could see a Panther's side or rear quarter, it could almost certainly defeat the armour at any reasonable combat range. Conversely, the Panther's 75mm KBUK-42 could penetrate the Sherman's frontal armour at most combat ranges. The Sherman Firefly retained the standard Sherman hull armour, 51mm on the glacis at 56 degrees for the M4 variants, or 63.5mm on cast front hulls for M4A1 variants. Neither configuration could reliably stop Panther armour-piercing rounds at normal combat ranges beyond about 800 metres for the cast hull. This created asymmetric vulnerabilities. Firefly crews understood they could kill Panthers at range but remained vulnerable to return fire. Panther crews understood they could kill Fireflies but might be destroyed before achieving a firing solution. The psychological equation favoured neither side comfortably. British and Canadian tactical doctrine evolved to exploit Firefly capabilities while managing vulnerabilities. Standard practice positioned Fireflies in hull-down positions or other covered locations, allowing them to engage German armour while minimising exposure. The 3 standard Shermans in each troop would manoeuvre more aggressively, drawing German attention and fire, while Fireflies provided overwatch and precision anti-armour support. This doctrine proved effective but placed enormous stress on Firefly crews. They understood their value. They knew German crews prioritized them as targets. Every engagement carried the knowledge that multiple enemy guns would seek them first. Ken Toot, who served as gunner and commander in a Firefly with the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, later described the psychological burden. The flash is so brilliant that both gunner and commander need to blink at the moment of firing. Otherwise they will be blinded for so long that they will not see the shot hit the target. The muzzle flash spurts out so much flame that, after a shot or two, the hedge or undergrowth in front of the tank is likely to start burning. This muzzle flash, dramatic and spectacular, immediately revealed the Firefly's position after every shot. Doctrine required Fireflies to displace after engaging, moving to new positions before German counter-battery fire or armour could target the revealed location. This mobility requirement added to crew workload and limited sustained fire capability. Despite these challenges, Firefly effectiveness in Normandy proved exceptional. On June 14th, Sergeant Harris of the 4th 7th Dragoon Guards destroyed 5 Panthers around the hamlet of Ligevres near Tilly-sur-Seulles. He achieved this by firing from one position, displacing, firing from a second position, displacing again, methodically working through the German armour before they could coordinate effective response. The most famous Firefly engagement occurred in August 1944 near Sintho. Trooper Joe Ekins, gunner in a Firefly commanded by Sergeant Gordon of the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, engaged a group of Tigers from the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion. In rapid succession, Ekins destroyed 3 Tigers. One of these Tigers, turret number 007, is believed to have been commanded by Michael Wittmann, perhaps the most famous German tank ace of the war, with over 130 confirmed kills. The circumstances of Wittmann's death remain debated by historians, with multiple Allied units claiming credit. However, forensic analysis of the Tiger 007 wreck and examination of combat reports suggest that an armour-piercing round from a 17-pounder, fired from the flank at relatively close range, penetrated the Tiger's side armour and caused catastrophic ammunition fire. Whether Ekins fired the fatal shot or whether another Firefly crew deserves credit, the engagement demonstrated that even the most skilled German tank commander could fall to the 17-pounder. These successes came at a cost. Firefly crews suffered casualties proportionate to their exposure. German anti-tank guns, Panzerfausts, and enemy armour all sought the distinctive long barrels. Statistics from Normandy show that Fireflies, despite representing only about 1 tank in 4 among British and Canadian Sherman units, suffered disproportionate losses. Crews understood the risks. They volunteered anyway, recognizing that somebody had to provide the armour-killing capability that kept standard Sherman crews alive. The cumulative effect on German panzer forces in Normandy proved significant. British and Commonwealth units faced over 70% of German armour deployed during the Normandy campaign, including the majority of elite Waffen-SS panzer formations. This concentration occurred partly by design, as Montgomery's operations around Caen pinned German armour in place, allowing American units to break out west. But it also reflected German recognition that British and Canadian formations possessed effective anti-armour capability that required heavy German response. Panther and Tiger crews, who survived multiple encounters with Fireflies, developed genuine respect for the weapon. Unlike the standard Sherman, which German crews often regarded with contempt despite its numerical superiority, the Firefly represented a peer threat. Some German veterans later acknowledged that encountering a Firefly created the same psychological response as Soviet tankers described when facing Tigers. A sudden awareness that they might be outgunned and that survival depended on perfect execution and some luck. This represented a profound shift. For 3 years, German tankers had enjoyed technical superiority on most battlefields. Even against numerically superior opponents, individual German tanks typically held advantage in protection, firepower, or both. The 34 had challenged this superiority on the Eastern Front, but Panthers and Tigers had restored German confidence. Now, in the supposedly less threatening Western theatre, a mongrel combination of American chassis and British gun was destroying Panthers with the same ease that Panthers had destroyed standard Shermans. The impact extended beyond individual engagements. German operational planning for Normandy had assumed that Allied armour could be defeated through superior German tank design combined with tactical skill. Rommel's defensive strategy anticipated that panzer divisions could maul Allied armoured spearheads, preventing breakout from the bridgehead. The Firefly, along with other factors including Allied air superiority and artillery coordination, complicated this calculus. By late June 1944, German commanders recognized they faced not just numerical inferiority, but increasingly effective Allied anti-armor capabilities. Intelligence reports noted the 17-pounder's presence not just in British and Canadian units, but also in independent tank destroyer battalions. The Achilles, essentially a 17-pounder mounted on an M10 tank destroyer chassis, provided mobile anti-armor support. Towed 17-pounder anti-tank guns appeared in defensive positions throughout the British sector. This proliferation meant that any German armoured advance might encounter multiple 17-pounders at unpredictable locations. The concentration of Panthers and Tigers, necessary to achieve local superiority for offensive operations, presented lucrative targets for Firefly overwatch positions. German armor casualties mounted steadily, with mechanical breakdown and ammunition shortages compounding combat losses. The United States Army, observing Firefly effectiveness, conducted its own evaluations. In summer 1944, American ordnance units tested captured Panthers against both the 17-pounder and American 76mm and 90mm guns. These tests confirmed the 17-pounder's superior penetration with standard ammunition. However, American planners noted that tungsten core HVAP ammunition for the 76mm and 90mm guns could achieve similar penetration, though HVAP remained in limited supply throughout the war. More significantly, American doctrine emphasized different priorities. The Sherman's primary mission remained infantry, support and exploitation, not tank versus tank combat. Tank destroyers would handle enemy armor. This division of labor meant that mounting the 17-pounder in American Shermans offered marginal doctrinal benefit, despite its superior anti-armor capability. The 90mm gun on the M36 tank destroyer provided comparable capability in a dedicated platform. The 76mm gun on later Shermans offered acceptable anti-armor performance while retaining better high-explosive capability. Consequently, the United States Army declined to adopt the Firefly, preferring to develop its own solutions. The British and Canadians continued Firefly production, ultimately converting approximately 2,000 Sherman hulls. Production peaked in mid-1944 and continued into early 1945. By autumn 1944, Firefly distribution expanded beyond the initial 1-per-troop ratio. As production increased, and as combat experience validated the design, some units fielded 2 Fireflies per troop. This increased anti-armor capability, but reduced general-purpose firepower, creating tactical trade-offs that unit commanders evaluated based on expected enemy composition. The Firefly served throughout the Northwest Europe campaign, from Normandy through the Netherlands and into Germany. Canadian units employed Fireflies extensively in Italy as well, where the terrain sometimes favoured the 17-pounder's range advantage. Polish armoured units, fighting under British command, received and operated Fireflies with considerable success. Perhaps the ultimate testament to Firefly effectiveness came from German crews themselves, who learned to fear and respect the long-barreled Sherman in ways they never feared standard models. Post-war interviews with German tank veterans consistently mention the Firefly as one of the most dangerous Allied armoured vehicles, often in the same breath as the Soviet IS-2 heavy tank with its 122mm gun. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.